Hello, this is Melissa Ryan with Susannah Horwitz, and I'll have Susanna introduce herself shortly. First, just speaking to the title. So I invite you to stay tuned. If you're someone who finds yourself just stressed out or overwhelmed every time there is either significant transition or just transition in general, like going from work to go pick up the kids, or maybe it's a transition of from task to task, and you're like, how do I stay focused or stay on track, because it's just there might be some residual feelings from the last task or whatnot. We're just going to talk about how to work with that. Susanna's going to give some tips of the trade through her lens. As I shared, she's a musician, she's an artist, and she utilizes being in nature, which is why we're in nature now, in her work. So Susanna, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into our topic.
All right.
Thanks,
Melissa.
You're welcome.
My name is Susannah Horwitz. I am an expressive arts therapist. My master's degree is in expressive arts therapy, which is basically pulling from all different modalities of arts: art, music, dance, drama, psychodrama, imagination, play, into clinical psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. And I also draw upon my background as an outdoor educator before I went into becoming an expressive arts therapist, and now pulling nature-based and all those different kinds of experiential things into therapy, because I find that that's really helpful when we're working with stuff and not just being able to talk about it. So yeah, that's me. Oh, and I have an office that's back there that I share with Aaliyah Littleton at the American Mountaineering Center in Golden. And but I'm often found outside.
Right where we are.
Right where we are, roaming around. Yeah.
And so before we kind of dive into the topic, just for those who might be tuning in, what is a nature-based therapist? What does that even mean?
I have to define it.
From your point of view.
From my point of view, I feel like it's an extension of, so the basis of what I like to do with people is help us really reconnect to using our sensory awareness to be in the present moment. And I feel like there's nothing that does that better than being outside. No matter whether it's nice or really rainy and cold. And
as the gathering was, yes.
There's so much sort of like, it's just in your face mindfulness. It's basically what it is. And I feel like all my training in expressive arts therapy has been about how to use the arts in that way also, to be able to sort of explore both your inner world but also incorporate what's happening in the present moment. And I work with a lot of trauma and anxiety and depression. A lot of those, like, we're caught up in our thoughts, and we could be sitting here for 2 hours and not being as present with that because we're caught up in our thoughts and our emotions and other things happening inward. And so I find that I'm using a lot of sensory-based experiential methods, and using art and nature together can just enhance the whole experience.
Because, like you're saying, just the act of being in this space, we know that, the most peaceful setting, research has shown, is being in a space, in a meadow where it's surrounded by trees. That the mind and there's all this research coming out. If you're really interested in it, we'll include some links of some resources, books. There's one of my, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a PSA, and it's called Nature RX.
What?
And it's a joke, but it's hilarious. There's truth to what they're talking about, and it's just like they're prescribing nature, and there are folks that are doing that.
But it's actually like, I'll say, this is your prescription from me, because I can't write them, but I can tell you to go outside and feel a leaf.
And while that may feel like, well, why would that be helpful? It's super powerful. So something that Susanna shared before we started our conversation, before we went live, is an activity that she uses that gets people in the moment, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
So could you walk me through, and maybe we could even use the
it.
environment that we're in, or be in relationship with. It's not even like
just
using.
Like any experiential, and this happened when I was teaching outdoor ed too, it's very folksy, so things get passed on. So I don't know exactly where this exercise came from, but it's almost like it's passed down almost like a song in a way. But where I learned it was from somebody named Katie M.S, who a lot of us know.
Yes. Hello, Katie.
Thank you, Katie, so much. when I was doing a wilderness-based training with her, and I feel like this is something that you can use anywhere. It doesn't have to be in nature. It's just a way to sort of get back into your sensory experience, to get back into the present moment, to sort of gain some balance with what's going on. So the way we start it is by, and we'll do it.
Okay.
So, well, I'll have you'll be my client.
Okay, thanks, Susanna.
So
I'm ready to go.
I'd love for you, just kind of look around. We're gonna first start with finding 5 things in the environment that you can see, and just describing a few small details about them, just really concretely what you see.
Okay, so something that stands out is I am looking out. You on the as the audience members cannot see, Clear Creek. And right where we are, there's some ripples in the water. The sun is shining down, so it's creating this effect of where it kind of is shimmery when you look at it. And then if I look kind of even closer to us, but still at the water, I can see some rocks underneath that are different colors. Some are softer from water obviously moving over it, and then some look a little more jagged.
Yep.
So that's 2. I see, well, there's a tree right here that, again, as you, the audience, cannot see. But it's got roots that are kind of sticking out, and it's branching out into the water. So the roots really stand out to me. And then also, I guess, I would say that's 4. Or that's 3.
That was 3 or 4?
Yeah, I think it's 3. And then from this tree, just this clump of leaves that are like also making contact with the soil. And so then my 5th thing is just the dirt around us, which some of it is wet, some of it is dry. So that maybe speaks to maybe some rain happened. I'm not sure.
Awesome. And so now we're going to go to, I just realized that we didn't start with the thing that I was thinking of starting with, but we can talk about that later.
Okay.
Of like noticing what's happening in your body in that moment. Usually when I start this exercise, it'll be something that's sort of like as a distress tolerance skill with somebody, but it can also be something just as practice for future distress tolerance. So usually I'll start out by saying, think about, if we were talking about something that was a little distressing, noticing where you're feeling a response to that in your body and really pinpointing it. So somebody might say, oh, I'm feeling a tightness in my chest. Well, where is it? More here or here? Oh, I feel like it's kind of in here. And instead of, for this particular exercise, instead of staying with it and sort of watching it move, we're just sort of like holding it for a moment, and then we're going to come back to it. So you just described 5 things that you could see. So now we're going to go to 4 things that you can feel, so tactile sense.
Okay, so we're sitting on rocks right now, so I can feel they're hard. The rock I'm sitting on, and it's kind of because it's granitic, it's got some sharpness to it.
Granitic, I like that.
Thanks. And then I have flip-flops on, which I just took off, and now I'm barefoot, so then I'm making contact with this sandy soil, and I can feel kind of it's cool. It's kind of grainy, and there's, again, that dampness I was referring to, so that's probably contributing to the coolness. A touch like the sun is coming through the trees, and so I'm feeling a little bit of warmth from the sun. And then also it's a little bit windy, so there's that sensation of the wind blowing my hair. And then I noticed when you were talking, my stomach was kind of moving around, almost like a flutter earlier, but then as I just did this sensation, it shifted. I'm not really feeling that. I'm actually feeling like kind of warmth in my chest.
Nice. Wow, you're already recognizing it. Nice. So now we're going to move to 3 things. It's a fun little game. It's always a fun game with me because I'm like, what's the next one? 3 things that you can hear.
Okay.
3 separate sounds.
So again, the water, I can hear it just rushing by. In the distance, I'm hearing maybe a construction sound. It's like a humming. It almost sounded like a chainsaw, but I don't think it was a chainsaw.
It's just sort of like a low grumbling.
It's like a low grumbling, but it had some pitches to it. And then, I heard that same sound. earlier you could really hear, you can hear a car going by because we were right off Park and they're redirecting traffic over by us. So yeah, that's 3 things.
Nice. So now 2 things that you can smell.
Which is harder.
And that just made you take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
Secret. Taking a breath.
Just greenery, like because we're by a bunch of trees and things.
What does it
This is
smell
a
like?
harder smell for me. Our sense of smell is harder for me, I would say.
Which is why we do only 2. Because sometimes it's harder for other people.
Maybe if I just smell something, like the dirt.
You can even go up to it and smell it.
The dirt doesn't really smell like much. It's a pretty neutral smell. But it smells kind of soily, I guess. So you can smell the greenery, you can smell the soil. This is one I guess I could practice kind of differentiating. That would be a good tool to do.
It's sort of when it's something that's a little harder, and for some people just the sensory experience in itself is harder because but it's slowing you down because you're having to go, what do I smell?
Mm-hmm. I just smell a whiff of something sweet, but I don't know.
I know what it is, but you identified it. Mm-hmm. So now one thing that you can taste. And I remind people that these things that you're sensing do not always have to be pleasant.
What could I taste? Well, I just had some dental work done, so I taste a little bit of the stuff that they put in my mouth, which was some sealant, I guess. It's very subtle. They pretty much flushed it out, but that's what I'm tasting. Mm-hmm. But even as we've gone, I've noticed all my sensation has just slowed down, which is kind of speaking to our title, which is being intentional and slowing down.
Mm-hmm. And even in this, so we're talking about transitional space and the spaces in between. And I find, and this sort of started to happen, more and more clients that I had would just be in sort of an activated state, and even within the session or between, or coming in from outside, or then leaving the session and going somewhere else, even if we were outside, going from anything to the next thing, I realized that there's a lot of space. Ooh, now we're seeing people float down the water.
And fall in.
See, you never know what's going to happen in any moment.
No
you okay?
problem. Are you guys good?
This is what I love about present moment experience.
Now we're in this moment.
And if we need to stop and go and get her, then we'll do it. But I think they're okay.
They're okay.
But the idea is just to be able to, so that we don't miss everything. And we're not going to be able to do this all the time. But as a way of practicing, it's being able to stop in the transition from one thing to another and notice what's happening in this present moment. Actually, I can use this as an example in a way. There's people who are leaving the water. They're transitioning from the water out into nature. I find that being in nature, we're always paying attention to it more.
Yes.
They're having to pay attention to their transitional space because otherwise they're going to fall.
And they're carrying
a tube. You can
kind of see in the background. Yeah, there they are.
They have to pay attention to what their surroundings are. They're not wearing shoes, so they're probably feeling it a little bit more. But there's so many things that we do sort of on a daily basis that are in some ways seem mundane, where it's and this is a lot of stuff that I draw from the mindfulness sort of practice movement. But being able to put some intention into when you're walking out a door, feeling the doorknob as you're walking out and going down the hall. I mean, a lot of it even speaks to some privilege, because I think about things that wow, I can be grateful for the fact that I can walk and I can go out of the door and I can open it and feel it as I'm walking out. And that's why I don't pay attention to it half the time. There are people who I work with who are wheelchair bound, and they have to think about things like how to get through a door all the time that I don't always have to think about. But a lot of times I can put some intention into the space where you are. And even somebody who's struggling to get through a door could probably be well, what else is happening? Is there a color on the wall that I can pay attention to that's also there? So part of the spaces in between, I feel is being able to pay attention to everything. Even right now, I'm there's this annoying sound in the background, but it's not the only thing that's there.
It's layered.
This beautiful stream in front of us. And it's about being able to be intentional so that you can sort of see a little bit of everything and allow yourself to have this perspective that you're not, you don't have to be so focused on your thoughts of the next thing, or the last thing. You can be more in the present moment. And even in the present moment, you don't have to be so focused on something else. It's one thing that's happening in front of you. There are pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral things all happening at the same time. And so I find that sometimes it just gives us a space to just naturally breathe, like allow our breath to just sort of happen in between. And another metaphor that I used was with music. So I think about this all the time. And partially I think about it because I tend to be a talker and I don't take breaths very
You're not alone here,
when you're
Susanna.
in music, there are rests in between the music that make the music feel more powerful, sort of
And
like
more full
and a whole piece and significant. If the rests weren't there, it might just be sort of, I mean, it could still be music in some way, but it's just a cacophony of sound. And so I think about that with not just when we're speaking, as like when you take a rest and a breath, it might even give more power to what you're saying. When you are transitioning from one thing to the next, you can sort of, each thing can kind of have its own space instead of so like overlapping one into the other.
And transactional. That's what it's very transactional. And so what you're talking about is creating a rhythm so you have more of a melody, you know?
Oh, that was so good, Melissa. I love that.
You know?
That was
I mean, I had a counselor one time say, like, everything you're doing is creating a rhythm to your life. And I was like, I do not like the music I'm making. You know, like it's like very like, staccato and choppy and
so
transactional.
You just had to rework the composition.
The composition. And so instead of focusing on balance, I really more think about how do I want my rhythm of the day to be. And every day I'm in a different mood and it's a different rhythm. And being intentional about and aware of that rhythm. Like, am I getting caught up in the staccato and it's like jarring? And that can be helpful too, right? If I'm just like trying to get some tasks, but even there, I still want some pause.
There's
even
some pauses, like even I tell people, like just for a few seconds, if you pause and just like touch a table and be like, very simple stuff, like, ooh, smooth table.
I'm feeling
it shifts our brain into being a little bit more present, and then also allows you to continue doing the problem solving that you need to do, because we can't problem solve if we're in that space of just like going or really activated. We have to sort of like take those pauses in between in order for, you know, the brain to continue to be on board and continue to make decisions and problem solve. And all of this is to say, I have problems with it too. I have to do it all the time. But I find that checking in those spaces in between, like when you take a pause for a few seconds, you're checking in, you're being like, all right, what's going on now? And not just with the outside, but then you can actually go inward for a few seconds, and then you can continue doing what you're doing, but you're just attending to it so that if something keeps coming up, you can be like, all right, I think I need to take a break and eat something, or I needed to get a drink of water, or wow, maybe I really do need to call that person. Right? And then you realize what your subconscious has been processing the whole time, because this is all still happening. And when you're aware of what's happening on a deeper level, you can be more intentional, you can more guide decisions and how you experience life. You really get it more influence the rhythm. And as you spoke to, like a lot of folks may not have access like we do. I mean, this is a huge privilege to just come down and like sit by the creek and talk, hugely. Like you were speaking to, just the ableism and the privilege, the access, where we are, or even culturally, like what feels safe and what doesn't, because I know that there's been a lot of people in the past I've worked with where like nature is like
not their thing,
not safe,
does not feel safe. And so the only way to do that is to tune into your body, and there's challenges with that, which if you want to learn more, which I'll link in the comments, Rika, Pearl, and I did a talk recently about why it can be difficult to even tap into the somatic, which would be a great companion to this talk. So I guess let's just, because I know we're kind of at time, like what are your final thoughts? What invitations might you have to our audience? Takeaways?
You know, I use a phrase a lot, and I feel like it's something that it's not mine. I don't feel like anything is really mine. But I use a phrase, it's a very short, like 2-word phrase. It's just simple sensory. So when somebody is thinking about like, well, how do I incorporate this into my life? It's like, just stop and just the simplest thing is something that we don't often think, because especially if you're in thinking mode, we don't think to do something simple because we think, well, that's not going to solve my problem. What is like sitting down and looking at the water going to do? But if you allow yourself to just stop for a moment, or even like feeling the smooth table, what is that going to do? I have this huge problem and it's not going to do anything. But when you allow yourself to experience it, especially over time, to just connect with the simple sensory experience, what I find is that I've experienced this for myself, and then other people that a lot of people I've worked with have been like, oh, well, that seems so simple, but I haven't been doing it. Because we're so caught up in like the doing mind, and like,
and not the being.
It's got to be more complicated than that. And really, I feel like,
it's just stepping into the being.
What did that do for a second? Just to be like, I just moved my shoulders.
Yeah, I just
turned
released
my head. Oh, one last thing is that sometimes when I'm talking to people about like, let's say you're laying in bed and you're depressed, and the last thing you want to do is like, even get up and swing your leg over. Even if you can just turn your head, it tells your brain that something else is happening.
And we're doing something different.
Right.
And with that, my last thought was just, I think it's Albert Einstein who said this, don't quote me, but just that we cannot solve problems with the same level of consciousness that created them.
Yes.
And so what this is really an invitation to have a different state of consciousness. So with that, we'll leave some information in the comments, and we're glad you joined us.
Thank you.